Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is indeed an absolute pleasure and honor to have you here, Madam Managing Director. This is indeed a historic moment for the Islamic Development Bank and also for the IMF. It's the first visit ever in our 50 years of history of a Managing Director of the IMF. And welcome to you and your team to the Islamic Development Bank. Today we will engage with two exceptional leaders that have played a very important role on the global development landscape, and both have very interesting experiences. Madam Managing Director, you've been at the helm of the World Bank and now at the IMF. At the World Bank focusing on development challenges, and at the IMF strong focus on monetary fiscal policy. So you are uniquely poised to see the challenges and your focus on solution orientated from both sides of the road, literally and figuratively. Mr. President, Chairman of the Islamic Development Bank Group, also a very interesting journey. You've had, in your own words, a stint at the IMF. You've been the governor of the Saudi Arabian Monetary Fund, so the central bank of Saudi Arabia, clearly a powerhouse on the global landscape, and now at the helm of the Islamic Development Bank, serving 57 member countries and beyond. Again, uniquely poised to see both sides of the coin. Excuse the pun, but seeing both sides of the coin and focusing to a large extent at this point in time on maximizing development impact across our member countries. Today's fireside chat, we will focus on the global outlook, look a little bit at the region, and some of the key challenges that we are facing. This is an important precursor to the upcoming Al-Ula conference, and I think would shed some light and insights into what one can expect during that discussion. Madam Managing Director, let's start with you. A few days back at the Arab Fiscal Forum, and then also at the World Government Summit, the IMF highlighted the significant challenges to the global outlook, some of the risks, downside risks that are there, but also equally importantly, highlighted the importance of prudent monetary policy, targeted fiscal policy for structural reform. Now, how would you assess the global and regional outlook? And what do you think policymakers need to be, in the region specifically, need to be looking at to address the elevated uncertainties that we face at the moment?
Assalamu alaikum. I am very pleased that I have a chance to be here with a great leader in the development field at a time when there is good news for the world and there is also trouble. In terms of good news, despite of the multiple shocks over the last years, starting with COVID, then Russia's war in Ukraine, and the spike in food and energy prices, both these events pushed the need for central banks to increase sharply interest rates. Despite all this, the world economy has remained resilient. Growth globally for this year and next is projected at 3.3%. Growth in this part of the world, in the MENA region, we expect it to go up to 3.6%. In the Gulf countries, around the average global growth, 3.3%. And that we need to recognize is truly remarkable. And when we ask ourselves a question, why is it that the world economy has managed to stay afloat, to avoid a recession? Let's remember that in the previous inflation spikes, the need to increase interest rates always led to a price to pay, and the price was recession. This didn't happen this time. And the answer is twofold. One, the world learned to work together. We have central bank governors coming together, ministers of finance coming together, quickly comparing notes on the diagnostics of what is happening in the world, and then coordinating actions. As a result, we have had a policy environment that supported that resilience. And second, we have a world that is at a fast-moving pace, and in its totality is a more diverse world, one that through diversity can demonstrate more resilience. But there are also very significant risks ahead of us. Number one, the crises have led to many countries to borrow at a very high level, and the burden of debt across the world we expect to reach $100 trillion, public debt only. And at the same time, growth is slower by historic standards. In the past, on average, we will grow around 3.8%, now slightly above 3%, year after year after year. And when we look under the hood, why is growth so weak? What we see is not a pretty picture. What we see is that, with the exception of the United States and very few other countries where productivity is boosting growth, in the remaining world, productivity is very low. Prior to the pandemic, productivity growth in advanced economies was 1.3%. Now it is 0.2%. And then we have more shifts that come from technology, from geopolitics, that are creating more uncertainty in the world. If I were to sum it up, and that is the picture we see, it is a more uncertain world, and it is a more divergent world. Countries that do well, take the United States, performing quite well. Take the GCC countries, bright spot on the global horizon. In contrast, we have many countries, for example, in the European Union, not doing so well. And of course, the most vulnerable middle income, low income countries that are falling further behind. I have been trying to sum up our policy advice to countries, and we came up with what I shared just now, with 3 Ds. Number 1, diversify. Diversify your economy, your trade, your relations with others. Number 2, deregulate. Don't allow the government to be on the way of private initiative. Deregulate smartly, but leave space for entrepreneurship. Private sector is the one that creates jobs. Number 3, make your economy digital, because otherwise you would miss on opportunities, and especially on artificial intelligence. And of course, in a world that is more uncertain, where changes are happening so quickly, we need even more the institutions we represent, that allows us to diagnose what is going on and allows us to come up with support for those that risk to fall behind.
So perhaps it's 4 Ds. We'll start with diagnose. Mr. President.
That's a very good point. Diagnose. If you don't know what's going on, you don't know what to do about it.
This is true. Mr. President, clearly an uncertain world, lots of uncertainties, lots of challenges. These will clearly affect the financing conditions for emerging markets, developing economies, and innovative financing mechanisms will become critical as we move forward. In the earlier discussions, it was also highlighted. How does Islamic finance, particularly through the use of sukuk, influence and contribute to the global financial systems?
Thank you for raising that issue, and thank you, Madam Managing Director, for your contribution on the global prospects, which are very challenging, to say the least. And that being the case, we need every bit of help we can get from whichever source we can get it. And I think Islamic finance provides a very promising additional instrument. It's not a substitute, it's an additional instrument. And an additional instrument that has been tested. The Islamic Development Bank alone has, over the past 20 years, issued about $50 billion worth, AAA rated. Mm-hmm. They have been held by investors, by central banks, by sovereign wealth funds, and everybody. I mean, the recurrent complaint I have is that you don't allocate enough to us. So we need to we collectively, the international financial community, we need to take advantage of this. I mean, this is also an instrument that prevents, to a large extent, excesses, like over-leveraging, like we suffered from in 2007, 2008. The Islamic finance is asset-based, and therefore you could not over-leverage in that case. And therefore it has a preventative role in the world of finance. And for our work, which is basically infrastructure development, the sukuk come very handy, because you could even meet all of the ESG requirements. I mean, you have a project that is green, you can issue green sukuk against it, and the virtuous cycle will continue to take shape. And these are not exclusive for Muslim communities or Muslim countries. The Philippines has been issuing sukuk, Hong Kong has been issuing sukuk, everybody is issuing sukuk. So I think there is a lot of possibility in Islamic finance. Now, last year I think sukuk reached about $1 trillion. The market of Islamic finance is about 3 trillion now and rising quickly. So I think we need to work harder in terms of coordinating and unleashing these powers of Islamic finance, because there is a lot of innate dynamism, but we need to be a bit creative ourselves. And I think that is something that we in the Islamic Development Bank will be very happy to cooperate with everyone. Of course, we have been doing pioneering work together with the IMF, and the report hopefully will be out shortly on Islamic finance, and I think we should take it from there and see how can we enhance, including supervisory regimes for Islamic finance, because sometimes people stay away because they say there may not be adequate supervisory oversight for that, and therefore will stay away. But I think the potential is huge, and the Islamic Development Bank has provided a real example of how it works. I mean, over more than 20 years, $50 billion, and maintaining the AAA rating.
I think that's really impressive, Mr. President. The point of coordinating and unleashing and tried and tested additional instrument is something that we need to scale up, and it's one of the things the Islamic Development Bank has been doing well and should continue to focus in this area. But Managing Director, let's look a bit closer towards the MENA region now. There's a strong push for economic diversification, structural transformation, but at the same time there are many countries facing challenges specifically relating to turning the page post-conflict. Could you share your views on some of the opportunities, challenges, and priorities going forward?
Let me start by recognizing the tremendous transformation that has been happening in the Gulf. For many years, the fund will present our Article 4 recommendations to countries in the region. We would be advocating for diversification of the economy, diversification of the sources of income for the government, for less government finance economic activities. And I can say humbly that what I see exceeds by far what we have been recommending, the decisiveness with which Gulf countries have moved on making their economies more resilient, more diverse, more agile, more productive is really impressive. I had an opportunity to visit last year Alula, where we will be tomorrow, a jewel for the whole world that is now part of the diversification strategy. And yesterday I was at the Red Sea again, vision implemented with firmness. But that would have not been possible if there was no attention to fiscal policy in a way that creates a discipline and opens up space for public-private partnerships in which the state puts money only to unleash the potential of the private sector to come in. Eliminating subsidies in a place where there is abundance of oil and gas is even more difficult than in places where there is a shortage. So why I'm starting from the Gulf? Because what the Gulf is demonstrating is two very important elements for success. One, leadership. When the leaders are firmly behind reforms, the reformers have an easier time. Second, the Gulf countries working together. The Gulf Cooperation Council is now a much more substantive organization where countries frankly compete with each other for the crown of best reformer. And I really am very keenly interested for us to be even more deeply engaged with the Gulf Cooperation Council. We are discussing how we can do our analysis, the Article 4 consultations, not just on a country-by-country basis, but for the Gulf as a whole. And then what we bring is being this transmission line of good experience from one place to another. How can we energize reformers elsewhere on the basis of experience here? When I look at the MENA region, it is a very diverse region. You have the Gulf, but then you also have countries that are not rich on natural resources. I think of, for example, Jordan. And you have countries that are faced with more difficulties. Middle-income countries with large population, like Egypt. You have countries like Morocco that have also adopted a more reform-minded approach to issues and is doing really well. So it's not a uniform region. And then you have the countries in real trouble. We all have been quite shocked by how dramatic developments have been in Gaza in particular, but also in the West Bank. We look at Lebanon, finally, president and government, an opportunity to turn a page
Sure.
Syria has been in a war-torn conflict-torn country for years, maybe moving to stability. But then we have Sudan, behind Sudan, South Sudan. We have Somalia that is doing better, but still has a lot to achieve. So if I were to say the three categories of countries, you have the really strong performing countries that are resource rich, but are not counting on their resources forever. They are taking the economy on a diverse path. We have the countries that are not resource rich, but have good policies. Morocco is a great example of this country. It doesn't have that kind of wealth that you have here in Saudi Arabia. And then we have middle-income countries that have grave difficulties. And then we have the vulnerable conflict-affected countries. And I want to talk about the third category, conflict-affected. Aside of the human suffering, the price people pay, there is also the impact on the functioning of the economy. And the big question to us, what can we do? For us at the fund, we have adopted a fragile and conflict-affected strategy, first time in our history, because the number of countries in conflict, unfortunately, has gone up. And what we are identifying as the way to help these countries is threefold. One, understand exactly the specificity of the country, the impact of the conflict, the impact on institutions of this of a conflict. In other words, don't treat them as one universe. Try to get with partners to a good, well-calibrated understanding of the country. Two, as much as possible, stay engaged. Even if we cannot finance as IMF, even if we cannot send missions as IMF, stay engaged. And stay engaged with partners that have deeper roots in these countries. Three, provide the support that is appropriate for the circumstances in this country. Whether it is only institution building, helping the institutions, if there is a central bank, the central bank, the Ministry of Finance to function, and then look at a moment when provide as much as possible support for what could policies be in that environment. And when the moment comes and we can engage more fully, decisively move forward. And you would see that time and again the fund not shying away from our most vulnerable members. Our board has been very, and I see our executive director is here, and I want to thank you for being here, for the support you give us. Our board has been very constructive in seeing that the fund cannot wait in our offices in headquarters until conflict is over and everything is good. We have to find ways, whether it is by having teams from the country, as is, for example, the case with Libya, coming to a safe location, and we still engage. We talk about the economy, we talk about the data. Whatever the possibility is for engagement, exploit it to the fullest.
Mr. President, this sounds like the IsDB, staying engaged, working together. The transmission line sounds a lot like the reverse linkages programs. And the fact that the economies of the IsDB span from Suriname in the west to Indonesia in the east, and a lot in between in Africa. Clearly these challenges are challenges that our member countries are facing. How do you see the impacts and prospects for global development on our member countries? And what strategies would you suggest for mitigating some of the impacts of the global shocks on our member countries, taking into account we're not a homogeneous group?
We are a very heterogeneous group, I think, in terms of economic structures, history, challenges, political stability, all of the above. But that is why we at the ISDB, at the Islamic Development Bank, we have to stay the course, not allow ourselves to be distracted by whatever events happening. I mean, there are disruptions. Some of them are positive, some of them are negative. But we really have to stay the course. We are the premier provider of infrastructure financing in our member countries. We have to stick to that. We have to enhance that role. We have to act even counter-cyclically. So when some institutions are pulling back or pulling out, we have to step in and not shy away from helping. We have to be, you talked about the third D, digitize. For example, the digital economies of some of these countries. They are a very important part of the infrastructure. We have to be there to help. Electrification. We were the Mission 300 for Africa. I was in Tanzania to attend that conference at the invitation of the summit. You know, they have 600 million people that don't have electricity. So they're trying to deal with 300 million. There are so many things that need to be done that I think we have no time to reflect on the on the barriers. We should not think about them. We should think about how to keep moving and not stop. This is really the role of the Islamic Development Bank, and this is what we try through, I think, a very nicely evolving group of the MDBs. I think I see them now. Actually, they remind me of when we created the G20, if you remember, in the beginning.
Yes.
I mean, they were saying, why are you creating this? And you're just wasting time meeting in these places and all of that. But when 2007 and 2008 hit, governors and ministers could call each other on first name basis. So it was much easier getting together and really finding solutions. I think the MDBs now can follow that track and deepen the relationships, share the pipelines, see where they, you know, some of us are better, we have a better convening power, let's say in West Africa or in the Middle East. Others have better convening power somewhere else. I mean, like in Latin America, the Inter-American Development Bank. So we work together and share knowledge and share information and move forward. So there is a great challenge now that there will be a shortage of financing for projects that are extremely sensitive for the development of our member countries. And therefore, we in the Islamic Development Bank, this past year, we exceeded $5 billion of commitments. Only 2.5 years previously, we had only $1.5 billion. So we are really gearing up, partly because the need is there, and secondly, I think the member countries are relying more on the Islamic Development Bank. Maybe they like the way we do things, the way we consult, the way we listen carefully to the concerns of the members, and therefore the lending that we are envisaging for this coming year will be more also, and this will be necessary for us to do, but also for all the other lending institutions, and that's why we're also cooperating with the Arab Coordination Group, which has all the other 10 Arab lending institutions. We're also coordinating with them very well in order to ensure that those members or those countries that rely on the lending from these institutions are really taken care of. So we have, in the Islamic Development Bank, we have a lot of challenges. meaning our members have a lot of challenges, but I think we don't have enough time to worry too much about those. We only have enough time to really dedicate to developing projects with our member countries, projects that have material impact on their development. As I always said, we're not profit maximizers, we are development maximizers. And we have to keep our eye on the ball all along, because we just cannot afford to take our eyes off the ball.
Mr. President, just on the keep your eye on the ball and stay the course, Madam Managing Director, I think you made an analogy a while back in that, we behaving as if we 8-year-old kids on the soccer field, and when the ball goes to the left, 20 kids run to the left and 20 run to the right. So staying the course, very important. Keeping our eye on the ball and on the end game, critical. Before we conclude, maybe just if there's any key takeaways or final thoughts you would like to share with us?
The IMF was created with the mandate of macroeconomic and financial stability, growth and employment. In a world that is more shock prone, the importance of securing macroeconomic and financial stability for growth and employment is even higher. And I believe this is the reason why, since COVID, our membership has grown to 191 from 189 countries. And it is upon us to demonstrate that we are true to our mandate, but that we also cooperate, collaborate with others, so we cover the whole field. And if the ball goes one way, there is somebody that watches the field that is without the ball at that time. We need each other even more. We need each other as partners and as friends. And I find it symbolically so encouraging that we came to the Islamic Development Bank of all days in the year on Valentine.
That's why I'm wearing the red tie.
The day of love
I was wondering why he has a red tie. He never wears a red tie, so I wonder why he did it.
This was deliberate. This was pre-planned. Mr. President, any final thoughts from you?
One is to thank the Managing Director for really being here and sharing her thoughts. They're very important for us, and I think even our colleagues that haven't heard what she's saying, they will hear it later. But we in the Islamic Development Bank, we're very proud that we have financed more than $195 billion of projects, more than 13,000 projects. We're very proud of that. But that tells us that the needs are great, and we need to really stay the course. We need to continue to enhance the creativity, innovativeness of our Islamic finance channels. Sukuk are great, we've developed them, but we can do more also in that area, because not only the Muslim countries or the Islamic Development Bank, the whole world needs creative, innovative financial instruments. I mean, just imagine if we really use the Sukuk on the retail level in Muslim countries where people are very concerned about how compliant they are with Sharia, and you open up that channel for them. I mean, you're going to create really something very, very significant. And therefore, the Islamic Development Bank, not only through its main activities of lending for infrastructure projects, but also all the other philanthropic activities that we do with a lot of agencies. I mean, look, Lives and Livelihoods with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Ghurair and the others. We fought polio in Pakistan at a time when it was really going rampant. And we were able to help with that. In Africa, we financed just water wells, small water wells. Why? Because these villages, they were sending their daughters to go walk for 4 hours before they reach the first water well. And it takes them 4 hours to come back to bring the water for their families. We just put that well, and then we also built a small school next to it. So just imagine how transformational that is to the lives, not only of these young girls, but also their families and their communities. So we have a lot of things that we are doing, and we really need to continue to be creative, because we cannot afford to lag or to fall behind. There are too many people who are dependent on what we do, and we need all of that passion, dedication, and commitment from our staff, from our partners, from everyone who has that sense of development as the imperative.
Mr. President, you've just brought us down to the ground very hard. We've been talking about, in the last few weeks, AI, digitalization, but sometimes it's just the basics. It's a small well that would make the difference and that can transform a life. And we should not forget that sometimes it is just the basics that are needed. This has been a fascinating discussion, and Al-Ula, I'm sure, is going to be even more interesting. Very clear that multilateralism is not dead. There's still a strong need for cooperation, for working together. We need to diagnose the challenges, tackle sometimes it's the basics, and sometimes it's a lot more advanced in terms of AI, digitalization, etc. But we should never forget that the basics are still needed in many of our member countries. Economic diversification, I'm going back to your Ds. The diversification, deregulation, governments and MDB sometimes just getting out of the way and let the job get on. And then digitalization. We'll have to find a nice D for things like the water wells. It's getting the basics.
It is dignity.
Dignity. There we go. So we now have 5 Ds. And on that 5th D, I would like to thank you, Madam Managing Director, Mr. President. This has been a really wonderful discussion, and I'm sure our colleagues have enjoyed this, and thank you to the audience. This has been really amazing. Thank you very much. And a big round of applause.
Thank you, Ali. Thank you, Ali. Thank you, Madam.